Hello, we are here in week 8. This week is all about connecting the patterns. And we're going to connect the patterns together first by reviewing all the patterns one by one. Then we're going to connect them with really no context. And then we're going to pull out a G back, basically a static G backing track, and practice playing all the patterns. I might go up this one, down, up starting on G, down starting on A, up starting on B, down starting on C. We'll play over G, and we'll do that a bunch. And while we're doing it, the main thing that we're doing is we're acknowledging, okay, I know these patterns, I know them up and down the neck, and I'm playing over the G tonal center. And this is what it feels like to play starting on A over G. This is what it feels like to play starting on C over G. And then, once we're good and comfortable with that, we're going to start picking out, like a grab bag, picking out all of the different tracks that we've done, starting on A, starting on B, starting on C, and we're going to play all of the patterns over different tonal centers. We're gonna stick to the pattern, and then we'll get a little improv-y with it. This week is going to be the most ear-opening week so far, because you're going to realize that you have all of the whole neck available to you when you are playing over any of these tonal centers. So if you're in the key of G, whether the track's tonal center is G, A, B, C, D, E, or F sharp, you have the whole neck and you have the same notes. What you're going to notice is that the scales take on their own thing, their own sound over each tonal center. It's really, really fun. It's really fun to discover, and you're going to start developing an ear for which notes within each pattern, which it's the same notes, right? It's G, A, B, C, D, E, and F sharp. But they feel different within each pattern. You're going to start to understand what those notes are in the key of G. And I'll just tell you each time. So, when we're playing over this tonal center, these notes are going to work. Or not, well, they're all going to work, but these notes are going to be kind of cool notes to deal with over this tonal center. So let's get started with reviewing each pattern first. And are there any questions or comments before we get started on that over the last several weeks?
We have none quite yet. Hopefully we'll get some in here in a minute.
Okay. Starting on G. I messed up one note there. I was going to do it again anyway, so I'll do it again. Three, 5, 7, 3, 5, 7, 4, 5, 7, 4, 5, 7, 5, 7, 8, 5, 7, 8. Really a nice pattern. We're not reviewing any of the sequences this week. We're just working on the scale patterns. Starting on A. Five, 7, 8, 5, 7, 9, 5, 7, 9, 5, 7, 9, 7, 8, 10, 7, 8, 10. Starting from B. Starting from C. Nine, 11, 12, 10, 12, 13, 10, 12, 14, 10, 12, 14, 14, 12, 10, 13, 12, 10, 12, 11, 9, 12, 10, 9, 12, 10, 9, 12, 10, 8. Starting from D. I love this part of the scale, just it's the same all three strings. Starting on E. Starting from F sharp. So you got to see the tablature, you got to see each pattern performed up and down in how they were originally taught. And now it's time to connect the patterns. And you can really do this any way you want. For the reason that I do not want to overload you with tab, I haven't tabbed all the different ways to connect the patterns. And I don't think that it's necessarily good to look at tab when connecting the patterns. It's actually better to take two patterns, for example, and figure out how you can move between the two. And if you figure that out, you figure out ways that you can do that, you can do it on any string, you can do it anytime. If you understand the two patterns, going between them and being able to dynamically switch between them, and you doing that, is going to be much better than learning a bunch of different tab examples. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take them sort of two at a time, and I'm just going to show you a couple ways that I've connected the patterns, or that I like to connect the patterns. Okay? The first and the most obvious one. Well, do we have any comments or questions?
We've got one question real quick here.
Okay.
This is a question from David. And his question is, not to get ahead of myself, but is this set of scales movable?
Yeah, they're all completely movable. So if you're playing in G, you can take everything that we've done in the key of G over these last 8 weeks and the total of the course, which is 10 weeks. You can take everything and you can move it to any key. You just have to know where the tonic is. And we're not doing that. We're keeping it simple. We're not going to take things to different keys. But yeah, it's limitless. I mean, once you understand the concepts in G, you can move them anywhere. Good question. Okay, so here's starting on G. What I like to do is I like to go up one and down the other and just practice that. So it's kind of this nice circular thing. And you can do that with any of the scales. Obviously, let's choose starting on C and starting on D. Cool, huh? Let's do this. Let's take all of the patterns, and I'm going to ascend one, descend the other, ascend one, descend the other, and just go all the way up. And just do that a couple times. These are just ways that you can practice spanning the whole neck. What I did there is I played starting on G an octave higher than we learned it, just to finish it out. So that's kind of cool. You know, initially when you're doing these things, you're going to have to stop and think. I still have to stop and think sometimes when I'm switching pattern to pattern, but it's a great way to get yourself all the way up and down the neck. I'm going to do that one more time, just kind of get in the groove with it. All right, another thing that's really kind of fun to do is to start out with one, and then you can do it anywhere. But I think it's kind of fun to make the D string your transition point. Watch. So you're going to slide up, and then you're going to continue as if you were starting on A position. But you're not going to start there, you're going to start here. I'll do that again. And this is stuff that these are examples of what you should be working out. I'm giving you ideas of how to transition. I'm also showing you that I'm giving you some suggestions, but you can do anything you want. Start with these, and then you want to transition on the B string, you want to transition on the A string, you want to, transition from this pattern to this pattern. Who cares? This is just ways to get started in this. So here we go. Transition. Back down. See what I did there? I transition on my first finger there. Here I transition on my fourth finger. So I'm combining two positions. You get more reach doing it that way. You also, there's some really interesting ways to develop licks when you realize that now I've spanned this much and not just this much. Okay? Another thing that I like to frequently do when I'm doing licks or 3 strings runs is I like to choose the G string. For some reason, these two strings, they're just fun transition strings. So that would look like this with these two scales. Really cool on the way up. Watch this kind of shapes that happen. It's that bottom part. I like having this much room, and that usually manifests itself, in practicality when I'm doing a lick like, See what I did? I slid down to that other position. Now I'm in that position again. So using the G string as a transition. And again, you can do that with any. Let's go here. That was a D string transition from the starting on C to starting on D. All right, another thing that I like to do, so again, I've already said that you can transition from any string, using any string. The middle strings are my favorite, and of course these strings are great, but you can use these other two, of course. Another thing that I think is really fun is to utilize one-string scales and then just sort of land somewhere, and then kind of identify where you're at with the 3-string scales and pick back up. For example, if I'm here, if I'm playing in G, and I'm on G up here, and I'm using the starting on D position, the top of it, what I might do is I might walk down my G string in the key of G. I might walk around on the G string, up and down, and then land somewhere, and then finish out in a different position. And sometimes that's not even very planned. It's not like I'm thinking, you know, position ahead. It's just whatever sort of phrase my fingers want to do. I'm familiar enough with the scales that I can jump onto one of them while I'm traveling around the G string. So it might be something like, you know. See, so I transition down to starting on G all the way from D, starting on D. Now I'm on my D string. And I ended on the starting on G. That doesn't have to be always down there, but I transition to the C. Starting on A. So you use any one string as a vehicle to move between them. Knowing your one-string scales, being familiar with your notes, you should be pretty familiar after having gone through all of these. How each string behaves in the key of G. Moving it to different keys it will be a little confusing because we've spent so much time in G. But this is a great exercise. Break out of the pattern, choose a string, muse on it for a while, and then I can descend the rest of the way in the starting on A pattern. It's a really, really cool way to work. Any comments or questions before we start going to tracks?
We do not. Kind of a quiet group tonight. So, okay. But if you're out there and you have any questions for Chris, just type them in the chat and we'll get them queued up and get your question answered. Yes, I can talk.
Okay, so as I said before, the point of doing these over different tonal centers is to start getting our ears trained to the fact that all of these patterns will essentially function the same way. You're playing in the key of G with different tonal centers. The whole neck is available to you. We're going to start in G on the tonal center of G, and I am free to play anything up and down the neck. We'll start fairly scalier, and I'm not going to get too far away. In other words, you won't see me doing like pentatonic box stuff for the most part. You won't see me doing things that aren't reminiscent of things that you could do in 3-string scales because I want to keep us in that mindset. So here we go. Here's the track. It just loops over and over again. I'm going to play all of them. I'm going to transition in various ways that we just talked about, keeping it's right front and center, the tonal center of G. Locating the root, or the tonal center, in each position. Letting my ear do it. There's the third. my ears, and therefore my fingers, wanted to gravitate towards that G note all over the neck. And I employed all the different transitional things I suggested and more. Now we're going to go to starting on A track and do the exact same thing and see how our ear changes. And what happens? We're going to want to focus on the A note starting on A, starting anywhere. We're going to want to focus on the A note. Yes?
Take a quick question here.
Uh-huh.
This is from Busy Guy, and the question is,
Sorry?
That's all right. I want to do a voiceover on that track anyway.
Oh, okay, good.
Suppose we are playing a song in G, it transitions to C, then D. Can you demonstrate such a lead progression using the scales we have learned?
If you're in G and C and D, you're in the key of G, and your tonal center is G. So you would be, actually, let's see here. I think, let me go over here to starting on G. Let's listen to that backing track. I think we're pretty close to that here. Let's listen here. G, C, G. C, I think we go to D eventually. Let's listen on. D. Yeah, okay. So this is going to be exactly what you're talking about. You approach it exactly like I just did. Your tonal center is G. You know it's in the key of G. So you can do exactly what I just did. And granted, and I admittedly and purposefully, what I'm doing is very scalar and linear because I'm trying to stick to things to show you how the patterns work. If I get too solo-y and stylistic, you're not going to see that as much. So, but watch. It works beautifully. And you kind of let you have these scales that you know all over the place, and you let your ear tastefully guide you. And sometimes you're going to land on a note that doesn't really, it's not like it's wrong, but it doesn't sound quite as pleasing. And as you practice this more and more, you're going to learn which notes over which tonal centers feel good. And that's all just part of, lots and lots of practicing, lots and lots of ear training. This is primarily an ear training drill. I hope that answered your question. It was a good segue into starting on A. Any other comments or questions?
That's it right now.
Okay, let's try the same exact thing that we just did with starting on A. And by starting on A, I mean the track from starting on A. We're going to play everywhere. So here it is. Here's the track. So that goes from A minor sort of to D major. Same exact scale. Z. But your ear, because you're playing on a track that starts on A, that's in the key of G, your ears just want to emphasize that A note. It's cool. It's cool how it works. It's cool not to overthink it either. Let it happen. Realizing that it's going to take some time. It's going to take some time to develop your ear in what we're doing. Any questions before we move on to starting on B?
No questions. Busy Guy wanted to thank you for the answer to the question. He said that you've connected the dots.
Cool. Excellent.
Yes.
Okay. This one's going to be a little weird, just because it is a weird sound, but here we go. See? There's a B. I just naturally gravitated toward it. starting on B, with the track, our tonal center is B, we have all the scales. And it really does drop in, your ear sort of drops into place and you start doing some things that you never really thought you'd do. It does take some time to start feeling a little bit less scaly early, but it's okay to be scaly early. That's kind of playing can be tasty. You just don't want to do it all the time and have that be your only thing in your bag of tricks. Okay, starting on C. Track, tonal center, C. Again, a completely different flavor. Your whole hand and your ear wants to gravitate towards the C because your tonal center is C. But you start getting used to things that sound kind of neat over using the scales. Little pockets in each pattern that revolve around these different tonal centers. Tonal center of D. Yes.
Got a question here from Jason.
Hi, Jason.
I noticed Chris playing more pentatonic shapes around the 12th fret once or twice. Any issue with mixing those in while we're learning the other shapes, or should we do those separately?
No, mix them in. If you're familiar and you can connect them back and get you know. So in the key of G, the E minor pentatonic, you know, any of these tonal centers, it'll work. You just have to know, and that's really a whole nother lesson, but that'll work. And then the A minor, that shape will also almost always work. And you've seen me going on both of those, because those, believe it or not, they're related to the 3 on a string scales. I'm not going to go into it at all of it. But those, you know, I'll go back to this one real quick, starting on D. As long as you bring it back, right? There's some notes that you don't want to rest on, but you can use it as a guide. So that note's not a pentatonic note, but... So it doesn't really work to just play the pentatonic scale, but using that as a little bit of a framework, as long as you're adding in those other notes. For example, if I just did this, it doesn't work. Some of those notes work, but they need to be resolved. So that's why what I'm doing is I'm taking this scale and inserting those notes into maybe this area. So that if I want to think in that pentatonic box for a minute, that's fine, but I have to know where those notes from this scale are in order to anchor. Otherwise, it just sounds like I'm being lazy and playing, you know, this does not sound right. Doesn't work. But adding the notes in and around it from a nearby 3 on a string scale does, because those notes are in the key of G. Starting on E. And finally, the ugly one, starting on F sharp. All right. So, what we've done this week is we have begun to train our ears to the fact that if we're playing in the key of G, no matter the tonal center, we have every note in the key of G available to us. And we're letting our ears and our knowledge of the patterns be our guide as we learn how to phrase all over the neck in the key of G. Are there any questions?
No questions. David did comment that B and F sharp are his favorite.
Ooh, they're the weirdest for sure. My favorites are probably A and C and D. I really like, well, yeah, I mean, I like them all. Thank you guys so much. Next week is going to be similar, except for we're going to be dealing specifically with the sequences. So we're going to be trying to position the sequences all over in different patterns over different tonal centers. And so it's going to be a little bit less improvisational and more like, ooh, how can we make this sequence work over and over again right here over this tonal center with this pattern? It'll be a lot of fun. I'll see you there.